Hey everyone, Box Spring here. So I'm making a game called Goblin Menace. That's going to be a top-down 2D pixel art action RPG with an emphasis on building your own army of unique NPC characters to fight these goblin characters. It's going to initially have a core gameplay loop around this kind of army building mechanic. Essentially, you fight goblins, you get loot, and then you use the loot to build your army and you fight more goblins. Beyond that, I want to expand this game into a full medieval fantasy sandbox. So, what does that mean? First, you get to run any business in the game. So, farming, blacksmithing, running your own tavern. You get to build houses, towns, and castles. You get to essentially be anybody you like. You can be a farmer, you can be a blacksmith, a shopkeeper, you can be a soldier in an army, or you can lead armies and become a lord, a captain. And finally, you get to explore an open world with caves, dungeons, and dragons to fight, and do some role playing with your friends. You can camp out in the wilderness and start a campfire together um, via online multiplayer. So, I want to talk a bit about the inspirations for my game. Um, it's going to have the art style and real-time combat from the Legend of Zelda series. It's going to have the army AI of games like Mountain Blade Bannerlord and also Star Wars Battlefront, where you don't you influence your AI allies, but you don't control them directly. Rather, they kind of move with you and fight with you, but your focus is on playing the RPG of your own character, right? So that's kind of what I mean by army AI. It's going to be a farming sim like Stardew Valley, but beyond that, it's going to be a more full business simulation, like something like the Guild 2, where you can really run any shop, any farm, any blacksmith, any workshop, hospital, whatever. And it's also going to be a sandbox, of course. So it's going to be like Minecraft, like a 2D version of Minecraft, or 2.5 pseudo 3D version of Minecraft. And I get inspiration from Minecraft on base building and procedurally generated worlds. Of course, we have to talk about Minecraft. And then finally, other inspirations include like Tibia and Albion Online for their open worlds, their housing system, their land ownership and management, and of course, online multiplayer. So I wonder with this combination of the army mechanic that I'm focusing on initially, that's going to be the hook for my game, and also this multiplayer aspect, if this will essentially be the birth of a new genre in some way. Like I'm calling it ammo RPG, a MMO, army MMO RPG. Um, so we'll see if this will catch on. But the idea is that you're in this online massively multiplayer world, where traditionally you kind of just you're controlling your own character and you move around that way. But in this game, everybody will have their kind of own little army, and you have your own leadership skills. So you may have a small squad of 8 characters, or maybe a large squad of like 16 characters, and you just move around the world. And when two armies like come across each other, like all hell breaks loose, and people start battling each other, right, with their own little armies. I think that could be interesting, like this kind of army MMO world. Tricky to build, tricky to balance, but I think it'll be an interesting angle into this game. Um, I get a lot of questions about how I'm making certain aspects of the game. I'm trying to create more tutorials. Some of these tutorials get pretty complex, so it's going to take me some time to be able to make everything. In the meantime, if you have any questions about how I'm making a particular aspect of the game, the perfect place to learn about that and to ask me any questions is to just join my Discord channel. I'll leave a link in the description below. But if you're a fellow game dev in my channel, you'll see me provide even more detailed updates and share resources on any assets that I'm creating and be able to follow my journey and kind of share inspirations with each other on our own game dev journeys. Okay, so on to the main event. The major update this time around is the improved follower AI. I'm gonna show what that looks like as I talk about it too. So last time the follower AI was really, really simple. Basically, if the follower gets too far away from the player, it's gonna kind of come back and chase after the player. And that actually was pretty good. It got us 60% of the way, I would say. Um, but it did feel a little bit more reactive. Like the followers feel like they were, being dragged by the player a little bit, rather than proactively moving with the player. So this time around, the follower AI has become quite a bit more complex. There's actually three components to it. The first component is the same thing as last time, that kind of follow behavior, but I'm now renamed that as being a recall behavior, right? It's like a lasso. If it gets too far away from you, you drag them back. Um, Above the recall behavior, there's actually another follow behavior, where within a short distance around the player, um, the rather than being dragged all the way back, the NPC will move towards the player, but will engage in any combat, right? So recall is the idea where the NPC is way too far. They need to get back to the leader, the player, um, but they won't do any fighting along the way. But the follow behavior is a shorter kind of lasso, where the NPC has more freedom. Namely, they'll chase after enemies and fight enemies, but otherwise will kind of come back to the player, right? So it's like a two-tier follower behavior kind of system. And in addition, when they're following the player, they pick a random spot around where the player is, and they kind of head towards that target position rather than kind of make a headway directly for the player. So this starts to look quite a bit more natural, right? They're kind of following the player's region rather than the player itself. So that already is making the followers quite a bit more proactive feeling, a natural feeling, and proactive feeling. There's actually a third aspect to the follower behavior, which I'm calling patrol. So it's very similar to a wander behavior. Previously, like with these mobs, the goblins that you see, the enemy mobs, they would just kind of wander around their position, kind of move slowly. But if mobs have a leader, then they start patrolling. It's like a more active wander behavior where, rather than moving in small ways around their own position, they now move in much bigger ways around their leader, or like a patrol target, right? And target can be either a position in the world or a mob, or their own leader. The patrol behavior essentially achieves the purpose of making the followers more proactive. They're not just being lassoed to the player when the player is getting far from them, but rather they are actually moving and kind of hovering around the player, like what you're seeing here. I did run into some pitfalls, both in terms of the design of the game and also in terms of the engineering. So when it comes to the design, I actually experimented with a few iterations. One was pretty creepy, where I was trying to get the followers to really true to its word move with the player, but it created like this really weird behavior where the followers are matching the player's movements exactly, and it looks like this military formation where everybody was moving in unison. It was super creepy. That might be a feature I introduce later if I ever introduce formations in follower movement. But for now, I want the followers to move around naturally and have a feeling where they can have some autonomy in how they behave, even though they are influenced by what a player is doing. Um, yeah, so that was interesting. And then on the engineering side, I did a major refactor to the state machine that I'm currently using to implement the follower system, such that it's now become way more scalable, way easier to implement, to add new states to it. And there's like a more centralized way of handling state transitions that also optionally can provide more state-specific behavior. I'm not going to go into the technical details in this video. If you have questions about how I did it, join my Discord channel. And also in the future, I'll try to create more tutorials about how I'm building the AI as well. Other minor updates include like improvements to the arrows. So arrows now no longer pierce through mobs. Before, when an arrow shoots through a group of like namely villager NPCs, it will hit everybody in a line. That's way too powerful. Like that could be, an upgraded skill later on, but we're not gonna allow piercing by default. Also, I've exaggerated the shake animation when the arrow lands on the ground or hits something. It's a subtle thing, but it makes the arrow just feel a little bit more real, I guess. And then, yeah, so I think those are the main changes. I think there was one more thing. Oh, yeah, a flyover behavior with the arrows. So that means, so the arrow have an arc to it. It kind of goes up and then down. And then I made it so that when it's in mid-flight, right, when it's high up, I disabled the collision so it wouldn't hit anything, hit any mobs. So it's kind of if you are fast enough, you can actually get below the arrow and dodge it that way, right? And have the arrow fly over you. So let me know what you think. I think that's an interesting and somewhat logical behavior for the arrows because they do have an arc to them in this pseudo 3D world. But yeah, so those are the updates. Now the game is in full screen as well. And yeah, the caves are now randomized. Like that was implemented already, but I just didn't turn it on. I had the same seed every time. Now the seed is randomized. So when you play the game, it is in fact a fully randomized kind of cave. If you want to try the game, the download link is going to be in the description. So all of these are kind of pre-alpha releases. They're going to be grouped with the alpha releases too. But so you can actually play this game, play around with the followers, get the armies to fight each other. I've had a lot of fun playing this game myself. Actually, I'm quite surprised by it, at this stage. But yeah, I definitely would encourage you to try it. Okay, so let's talk about the next steps for the game. The next major updates will be like actually being to hire these followers as mercenaries with the gold you're getting from the goblins, adding food, healing, and a foraging behavior so the NPCs and the mobs can all go out and eat their food, find food, eat them, and stay alive. One thing I didn't mention about the game right now is there's actually a flee behavior with the NPC. I have added that too. Um, so one of the commenters suggested this, so thank you for that feedback. But the flee behavior has now been added. So Black in Code suggested that. Magitech suggested having the followers predict where the player is going. So I've implemented some version of that. Really appreciate everybody's feedback on the game. So thank you so much for that. So yeah, but one of the issues right now is that the followers would die very quickly. With the flee behavior, they are much more resilient, but eventually they will still die. But by adding food and hunger and healing, that's going to make replayability vastly more improved. Um, so after adding these things, I'm going to do some more optimizations around the spawning, making the village and the forest environments more aesthetic, making the caves more aesthetic. I got that suggestion from KPPP. Thank you for that. And then basically that's it. Exporting it to, I want to try exporting to iPad if I can, deploying to itch.io. And then that's the alpha, right? There's going to be a core gameplay loop. There's going to be progress saving. There's going to be a sustained play. And I'm super curious to see how the community is going to respond to that. So everything up to this point is going to be the pre-alpha. That's going to be the main alpha launch with the core gameplay loop that's going to launch on itch.io. After that, the next somewhat major feature is NPC idle speech. I think that's going to give the NPC villagers quite a bit of personality. So what that is that there's going to be text hovering above the villagers where they just say some random things every once in a while. And different villagers can even have different personalities for that control what kind of things they would say. Like some may be depressed, some villagers may be very energetic and battle hungry. You can let your imagination run wild on that, right? So examples would be like, another day, another life. I once took an arrow to the knee, from Skyrim. I wish I had a girlfriend with wavy hair, kind of silly things like that. But I think that adds some, simple personalities to the villagers. And, for a player that didn't do their interviews with the villagers when they're hiring them, they may find some of them have pretty annoying text, so they'll have to live with them if they're not careful with who they hire. So that adds another dimension to building up your mercenary group. If you have suggestions for what kind of idle speech you want the villagers to have, leave them in the comments below, and I would love to see them and include them in the game. So thank you.